When you're responding to an active shooter event or trying to manage an active shooter event, does the order in which you do things matter? That's today's topic. Stick around. Welcome to the Active Shooter Incident Management Podcast. My name is Bill Godfrey, your podcast host. I am joined by three other of our instructors here at the National Center for Integrated Emergency Response. I got Kobe Breen on our law enforcement and medical side across the table from me. Kobe, good to have you back in.
Thanks for having me, Bill. Appreciate it.
And Adam Penley, an old veteran here of the podcast, back in. Good to see you again, Adam.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
And Juan Atan on the Fire EMS side, like myself. Juan, good to have you back.
Thank you for having me.
So today's topic is sequencing our actions and the order in which we do things. Does it matter, or do we just need to get everything done right now? Adam.
Well, certainly it matters as far as your initial response, some actions that have to happen right away. There's going to be a lot to do. You know, if this type of call comes out, you know that there's going to be a lot of things that have to happen from start to finish, and you can't do them all at once, right? So you know, on the law enforcement side, one of the very first actions is to try to get there, size up the situation, engage, and make sure that others that are following on know what you're seeing and hearing and moving towards the active threat. That's kind of sequence number one, in all of this. But keeping in mind, and I'll let my, folks with more fire EMS experience happen, simultaneously, those resources are toned out as well, right? So simultaneously, there's some first actions that they're going to take. So law enforcement's going to the scene to do that initial active threat response, whereas fire EMS is dispatched at the same time, and there's certain first actions they're going to take. And then, other stuff obviously happens in sequence after that.
Yeah. We talk about our priorities. Priority number one is active threat. Priority number two is rescue of the injured. Priority number three is then clearing and returning the thing to a safe, the area to a safe condition. And we can do more than one thing at a time, but when you're shorthanded and you got right now problems, you refer back to active threat, rescue, clear. So Kobe, as we get the first one or two contact teams downrange or moving downrange to deal with the threat, what needs to happen on the incident management side coming above that?
They need to, one, listen to what's needed and kind of projecting out like they have been there before, which they probably should have. If they're at that level, they've probably either trained for being the contact teams that have moved on, progressed on, and till they've gotten to that level, and they know what the contact teams are doing, and they're just listening and kind of evaluating what would I do if I was in that, and just providing that general nudge that, have you thought of this? Have you done this? And securing that and listening for the important statuses is kind of what we determine is what's the suspect status. And that means that's kind of determined when we could move on, and then asking for that, are they isolated, distracted, neutralized? Are they gone? Any one of those things that are built in, that determines when we could start bringing in, when LE will start bringing in that RTF, those medical assets to augment their response inside and start tasking that with the clear and the evacuation. Right.
So, Adam, you got the contact teams, you got one or two contact teams downrange, and they're dealing with priority number one, which is the active threat. Mm-hmm. Right behind them, the management structure's got to start standing up, and hit with a tactical. Why is that so important? Why does that order matter?
Sure. So I'm just going to extend on everything Kobe just said. The one part of the sequence that should not happen is that every law enforcement resource, from the first on the scene to any supervisors to follow-on officers, if they all go inside and they all try to do one job, none of the other jobs are going to get done. So all those things that Kobe's listening for, like what is the status of the active threat? Let's communicate with our fire EMS partners. Let's start preparing for rescue, right? That's things that you can do simultaneously. If every resource on the scene runs in the front door, nobody's preparing for those other things, and no one's preparing for contingencies, right? So again, the proper sequence is to let enough resources, but the right number of resources, go do job number one. dealing with the active threat. And then starting to add that management structure right away, using the fifth man concept, that fifth officer. It may not be the exact fifth number, but it's somebody that stays put to start managing all of the follow-on resources and all the other jobs that are going to get done. And some of those happen in sequence, some of them happen simultaneously, but they have to happen. That's the most important thing about getting your sequencing right.
So one, you got contact teams, you got, one or two contact teams standing up, going down range. We've got a tactical position that stood up and staffed. The very next task that we call for in the checklist is staging. Why is staging so important? Why that early? Why does it matter?
Well, staging is your resource. Is basically that secret sauce, as we mentioned, because that's what's going to get us the resources needed to get the mission accomplished for us. So getting that staging in, as Adam said, you don't want everybody going to the location. Yes, everybody wants to play in the sandbox, like they mentioned, but you have to put that break on if you got that fifth person already taking care of the tactical portion. Now we got the staging. Okay, let's start staging and see what resources are needed and when they're needed, and make sure that they're there for when the next actions begin to set up those rescue task forces. We have that staging readily available and don't have to wait for those assets to come in.
And, I think to extend on that one, there are some communities that have ample resources and they can dump a lot of resources in a short period of time. They're the exception, not the rule. Most communities are going to have limited resources. And at the time that you're trying to respond and understand this thing and get your arms around it, you need to make sure that the few resources you've got are doing the tasks that you need done right now. The other thing that and that's part of the role of staging is that task and purpose to assign. But I think the other thing that's important to understand is that we've got individual unit resources showing up, but they have to be assembled into a team. So you've got 2, 3, 4 police officers that show up. You got to organize them into a contact team. Same thing on the rescue task force side. We need to get some EMTs, some paramedics put together with, a couple of police officers, we hope, and staff up that rescue task force. And so you've got these individual unit resources that arrive at this common staging point. You can quickly check them in and say, okay, let me get a contact team on deck. Let me get a rescue task force on deck, ready to go. Organize them into teams. And then when tactical's ready, calls back and tells you what he needs.
Right. Yeah. What tactical is asking for it. So police officers kind of go in the line of just being present is a use of force. We're taught that. Just our physical presence is a use of force, be it on any other scene. So we're kind of getting away from that in this, where yes, our physical presence is needed, but we need it at the right location at the right time. So to use a football analogy is that you don't build the kicking unit out on the team that's on the field. You call that in, and that's what's happening here. Is those guys can be there and they may interchange, but virtually or essentially you're going to be bringing the subject matter experts in for that incident, and that would be your RTS. That's going to be your specialized units, your things like that. And it's when you need that. Are you just going to try to build it there, or are you going to build it off on the sidelines and then bring it in? Sidelines being the staging of that game, and somebody's organizing and putting all that together.
And, and I think at this point in the discussion, when you talk about sequencing, some people are going to have heartburn with the idea, wait, you're still talking about a contact team 1 and 2, and now tactical is setting a staging area? That's too early. We still need people inside, so on and so forth. But that's not true. And we've done whole podcast discussions on the type of staging we're talking about. But I think it's worth emphasizing that this is a gear up and go staging. This is multiple resources coming from different directions. And when that next resource is in a team and ready to go, we send them downrange. We get them where they're needed.
In one vehicle.
In one vehicle, right. So we cut down on the parking problem. We have everyone arriving at the same time. They're getting the same briefing. They know what their task is. They know who they work for. They know what radio channel they're going to be on. All of those things need to happen in a designated location. Now, staging at this point in the sequence may not even have a fully dedicated staging manager yet. Your first law enforcement supervisor is probably going to be the one to designate an actual staging manager. Your fire EMS first on scene is going to designate someone to manage staging on the fire EMS side together They have to be together because we have heard and seen horror stories where fire EMS is ready to go, but all the law enforcement are gone.
No, it just doesn't
You
work.
know, nobody has stayed put to do that very important job, which is the next priority: begin rescue. Right.
And herein lies why it's so important to sequence these actions and actually write them down, work from a list, as opposed to the seat of your pants. The first contact team that's downrange, dealing with the pointy end of the problem, they don't really care about staging. They have limited care about tactical.
Right.
They have no care about staging or any of the rest of the response. They're focused on the pointy end of the problem, as they should be.
Taking care of it.
And meanwhile, at the same time, tactical's focusing on how are they doing? What does the rest of this look like? Where else do I need to deploy teams? Do I need to get more teams to them? Do I need to send them to another area? Are we dealing with a threat that's on the loose? Are we dealing with more than one threat? And tactical has that focus, but even tactical doesn't care about staging.
Right.
But when that contact team wants another contact team, or tactical wants another contact team, or tactical saying, I'm ready to get the medics in here and the rescue task forces, all of a sudden staging it becomes really, really important to the equation. And my point in going through that long-winded explanation is to say part of writing these things down and do them in order is because we need more than one thing to happen at the same time, but you can't individually be the one doing all of them.
Absolutely.
You got to delegate it.
Yeah, and part of the delegation is these kind of scenes can get out of control really quickly when it comes to the number of resources. You know, a lot of times law enforcement, whether it's the primary officer, the first officer on the scene, or a supervisor on the scene, in their day-to-day world, they're able to direct a lot of resources. You know, they're able to say, I need these 2 officers to go do this, these 2 to do that, and they know their unit numbers. This gets out of hand really quickly as far as the number of resources. So without having a designated staging area that you can call, you start losing track of resource numbers. And what staging allows you to do is think of tasks. The next thing I need to do is I need to have somebody on the north side. I need to have an inner perimeter on around the crisis site, and I need an outer perimeter because we're not sure where the suspect is. If you're in that tactical position, you can start thinking about tasks instead of worrying about individual unit numbers. It's another big advantage of having a designated place where people go and get those assignments.
So as we sequence this thing out, so we've got tactical stood up, we've got the staging stood up, and we're going to, at some point, switch into priority number 2, which is rescue of the injured, hopefully very quickly. We're hoping that the contact teams and tactical can deal with that threat and get us to a warm zone operation pretty quickly. In order for that to happen, we've got to do some coordination, and that is under the heading of triage and transport, who need to be standing side by side with tactical. Why? Why is that so important?
It is very important because, again, we've talked about being in silos. We don't want triage and transport being on one side of the building where tactical is on the other side of the building. We want to be next to each other so that when tactical looks over to me, I'm triage, and says, hey, are your RTS ready to go? Yes, they're ready to go. Where do you need them? We are ready to go. So we know exactly what needs to be done, because if we were working on silos and you're on one building, on one side of the building, and I'm the other, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what you're thinking. So we're not integrated into one team. So it's very important to make sure that we're working all together on the same page and following those tasks.
Right. And that we need to know everyone on the scene, again, working and training from a checklist format, they need to know that the next thing in the sequence is rescue. So to kind of extend on what you said, Bill, we may not have fully dealt with the active threat yet, because we know many times they have fled the scene. They've stopped shooting for unknown reasons. They might be barricaded somewhere. They might have been taken out somewhere else. But what law enforcement can do, because they know the next important step in the sequence is beginning rescue, is they can secure what they have, right? That first contact team may continue the mission of trying to find who did all these bad things, but somebody's going to stay put and start fixing what we know we have. And that is, we know we have casualties here. We know we have an area that can be secured, because the next thing in the sequence is rescue. And if we get stuck on active threat, and we're still hunting and hunting and hunting. One of the, I've used it many times in other podcasts, but I'm going to use my turn of phrase, is that known bleeding will not stop while you search for unknown threats. So if you're still out there hunting and you haven't found anything and you don't have it in your mind that, hey, the next thing we need to get done is rescue, then you're going to get stuck. And to extend on what you said, the only way you're not going to get stuck is if you're working together.
Kobe, you have spent a lot of time over the years working with patrol officers on contact team functions and done a lot of coaching in that position. Inevitably, the first time they hit the scenario where the shooter's in the wind and they don't know why. The shooting stopped. They don't know why. They don't know where he is. They struggle to shift gears to the rescue priority. Why do you think that is?
It is. 'Cause that's just how we're ingrained. Is the bad guy's supposed to be there, and all our trainings and all our thoughts before that. I shouldn't say all. I'd say majority of the time, all of it is the bad guy's supposed to be there, and we're always second guessing ourselves because I've been in that deal. He's got to be here. They've got to be here somewhere. What am I missing? And I don't want to be that person that missed him. We don't want to be that team that missed it. So we're going to go into that until somebody who is looking at it from a higher level says, hey, we're getting resources now. We're getting information now that they're probably not here, or they have gone. They've fled this area. They're stopped down the road. They're at another location, anything like that. So we just got to break that of at some happy point or some median in there is like we need to look at what's important now. And if they're not telling us where they are, bad guy, we got to work on what Adam's saying is where the injured are. So once we lose that, if we spend so much time looking for them, we're going to lose the other them. We're going to lose the other.
And the reality is we've all seen this in training. We've seen people struggle with this. Sometimes somebody on the contact team, a single officer will speak up and go, hey. Let's divide our tasks up here. Contact one, you go do that. Contact two, let's get back and set up a CCP, do this. We've also seen where that doesn't happen.
Right.
And tactical has to say, hey, three contact teams. Contact team one, you continue searching. Contact 2 and 3, move back to this location to deal with this task.
Right.
And that's part of the structure and the purpose to get that overlap, Adam. Why is that so important?
Well, I think it's the important thing about the structure of having a sequence and having a checklist and going back and cross-checking things that haven't gotten done, right? If you're in that higher up position, and when I say higher up, it doesn't even have to be a supervisor. It can be leadership at any level of the organization where somebody in that tactical position is thinking through the priorities and the sequencing of things, and they go, all I'm hearing is searching. All I'm hearing is searching. But I did hear them call out 8 casualties in the library on their way up. Who's dealing with those? And hopefully they're switching gears and saying, okay, I have enough resources now. Let's do the next thing in the sequence, which is rescue. And then shortly behind that, and sometimes simultaneously, maybe we have dealt with the active threat and we're beginning rescue, that those additional resources that are looking for a job to do, we start thinking of the next thing in the priorities. We got to start checking all the other spaces in the crisis site for more injured, for other things that need to be cleared, right?
Yeah. So we get to the point where, we've got triage and transport that are shoulder to shoulder with tactical. And we found from experience, because when we first started doing this over a decade ago, we didn't have triage and transport shoulder to shoulder with tactical. And that caused all kinds of communication errors and mistakes, in some cases unsafe situations, but mainly it just slowed things down. So we've got tactical triage and transport shoulder to shoulder. They're making decisions about downrange and pulling and pushing resources. So we get the rescue task forces downrange. Now, like Adam said, maybe the active threat has been dealt with. Maybe they've been isolated. Maybe it's a question mark. But meanwhile, we back at the big house, we are dealing with the rescue operations and getting RTFs downrange. And when that first RTF goes through the door, when the first RTF goes through the door, there's a tendency to grab the closest patient and say, this one's mine.
Correct.
Why is that a mistake?
It's a big mistake because, again, there's more than one patient in there. And we're dealing now with the time. The clock is against us right now because, again, these officers, the contact teams were in there. We don't know how, we know exactly how long they were in there, but they were shot. We got age differences depending where we're at. So we're working against the clock now. So we have to start doing our triage, start taking care of our patients, and then start moving these patients out of that location as quickly as possible. Because again, time is against us, as mentioned before. And each patient is like, we talk about, everybody's going to see a surgeon right off the bat when we take them to the hospital. They're not, because depending on the severity of that injury, let's say this patient here it's an older patient, got shot in the leg. We took care of it, but he's bleeding a lot, so he's going to see the surgeon a lot quicker than somebody that had a graze or something to that effect. So, we're going to do our own triage, take care of the patient, take them to the hospital, then the hospital is going to do their thing and see who's going to go priority number one to the surgery. Because a lot of people go, they need to go see a surgeon right off the bat. No, it doesn't happen that way. The hospital is going to do their thing. We did ours. Now the hospital is going to do their thing. But again, for us, mentioning that 8 patients, where are they at? The good thing of being triage next to tactical, I could nudge tactical and say, hey, didn't they mention that there were 8 patients in room 31?
Right.
Do they need some first aid in there right now? And tactical can go to the contact team and say, hey, contact team number 1, you mentioned 8 patients in that room. Do you need to get our rescue task forces in there? So that's a great thing of having us next to each other, because if, like I mentioned before, if you're on that side of the room and I'm on this side of the room, I cannot nudge you and say, hey, tactical, I just heard there were 8 patients in room 31. Can we go in there now?
Right. Yeah. And I don't think it's bad to be afraid of that different responders have different roles and are going to be nudging for different things, right? They're going to, and that helps with the sequencing as well. Because if you get stuck in your one silo and you're only thinking about the things you're supposed to do, you're forgetting that all the other stuff needs to get done. And you're forgetting the fact that each patient might kind of be on their own clock, right? We know we're fighting the clock the whole time, but different patients were potentially shot at different times, and their situation is more dire.
Tagging off of what Adam just said, the situation is more dire depending on the patient. So, Kobe, you've got both law enforcement background and medical background, and one of the misconceptions that it seems to me that quite a few law enforcement officers have, they just don't know, is that somebody's been shot, they need to go. And one of the challenges for us on the medical side is to figure out the order in which they need to go, because not everybody's been injured with the same severity.
Right. Yeah. So we're breaking that down. We're trying to give them, hey, what's the worst? We say worst is first. So what is worse? Where in the extremities can it be? Are the tourniquets working? Are they being? Are they stop the blood flow or the blood loss? If they're shot in the truncal area, or you have the tension pneumothorax, or they're shot in the head or the neck, all right? That's a whole junctional area in itself, and what to do with that. If the tourniquets aren't working, if they are working, does that reduce them down, and then the ones that we don't think about, but a neck shot or the chest shot, does that raise them up? If they're unconscious or they're conscious, does that raise them up on the thing? Unconscious, I would say yes, because that's the body's way of saying you're losing
something's not right.
You're losing the ability to make great decisions, so we're just going to do a control, delete, shutdown, and we're going to let somebody else come and fix it. And that's what I try to tell them is the unconscious, that's the body's way of saying, you're losing that ability, so we have to do that. So they are unconscious. How do we leave them in that cramped position on the ground, or we position them, because we can make them worse if we do nothing. So even a failed act is still an act. All right. So we just give them something to do, something to take care of. And if we think it's bad, it's probably bad, and jump on that. And then what is working, and that's where some police get cued in. And I was, I've got tourniquets on the arm. He needs to go before the person that's shot in the chest. Well, why? Because they just see the thing that's attached to them. They don't see what's inside. They just see the thing attached to them. So we're trying to get that into there. And if you don't know, who do we go to? RTFs, or we ask. Yeah.
And I know I've seen law enforcement on this, they might not even be thinking medical sequencing. They're just thinking that I want all the patients out of this room so I can move my team to the next room. And that's the wrong, sequence.
I just want it done. Right.
And again, doing this integrated training to get people to understand getting law enforcement to understand that there is an order of things that we have to do these actions first, because, the goal is to save the life. The goal isn't to just get them off scene. The goal is to make their situation better, to increase their survivability. And there's certain things that have to happen before they're moved to increase survivability. Doing the integrated training and getting law enforcement teams to understand that. Yes. Whereas a law enforcement team, they just want to, hey, I need all these 5 patients. I need all these 5 patients out of here because I want to secure this room and move to the next one.
If I don't see them, it's not my problem.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And that's bad sequencing.
Yeah. And it's funny. I had a conversation recently with a law enforcement instructor, and they were saying something to that effect of, I just want to get them loaded, get them out of here, and I want them out of here. And I said, no, what you want is for them to survive. Right. And if you don't let us do our job on the medical side to figure out who needs to go first and who can wait in that proper sequence. I mean, the clock is ticking, but every patient's clock is different. Depending on the nature of the injury, which is not always terribly obvious, and certainly not part of the START triage system. But, so we've got our RTFs downrange. Tactical's got its contact teams. We got security. Maybe there's some clearing that's going on. But we need to get a transportation area set up. We need an ambulance exchange point, which by all measures should have some security attached to it. It's interesting to me that most of the time, it's EMS that's saying to law enforcement, hey, I need an AEP set up and secured, because they didn't think about it. And yet the one that needs to pick it and get it secured is largely law enforcement. Adam?
Sure. So what's funny as far as the sequencing goes is sometimes you might see the opposite, right? I mean, I like that the transport officer is able to say to tactical, we need a good route and we need a good ambulance exchange point. On paper, on the map, it looks like this would be a good location. Can you secure it? They work that out with the downrange. Well, then sequencing wise, the transport officer, he just wants to get all his transport units down there right now. Like, let's get all 6 of them in line so I can go ahead and load them and get them on the way. So now the opposite happens, where law enforcement has to say, slow down a little bit. You can start pre-staging them a little bit, get them a little closer, but I can only safely secure 1 or 2 at a time, right? And say, okay, you have them bring 1 or 2, get them loaded, and then we'll bring the other 1 or 2 right in behind them, because 6, 7 targets lined up is not good for law enforcement.
Suboptimal.
So, exactly, suboptimal. That's a good way to say that. But again, the opposite kind of happens, right? On law enforcement, we want all the patients out. Let's get them out now so I can move to the next room. The transport officer is going to do the same thing. Let's get all 7 of my transport units down there so I can get them out. And we have, in that integrated working together, solve some of that.
Yeah. So here's the interesting thing is, we've talked exclusively about what's going on downrange with the threat and with the injured. But meanwhile, back at the big house in the command post, there's a whole bunch more work that downrange may not particularly care about, but it matters. It matters for the protection of the scene. It matters for the community, matters for the security posture. Adam, where does that play in? How do we make sure that the perimeter gets handled appropriately as additional resources come in, and that sequencing?
Right. So knowing that, first of all, knowing and recognizing that those jobs have to get done, and understanding that they can happen simultaneously, that there's others that can take on those roles. Understanding that when you train to a checklist, there's whole other sections here that need to be addressed. And the further up you are, maybe at the command post level, you have you're listening. You're certainly making sure that all of those earlier tasks are being accomplished properly, but you should be looking up and out. And in a checklist format helps you do that. So to your point, there's things that have to be thought about, like setting up early intelligence and understanding what's going on and how and why this is happening. And the perimeter, like you mentioned, those are some parallel things that can be happening right now. And we also know in a social media world that we live in, that the first information about this hit social media probably while it was happening. Somebody might even have been Facebooking it live, or on one of those devices. So we think of public information as an after thing, a press conference after this has happened. That's not the case. You have to have that public information piece happening almost simultaneously while the life-saving might still be going on.
Yeah, numerous examples of attacks at schools. The parents are at the perimeter before the first law enforcement officers even have a contact team established downrange. And so that becomes a huge challenge in protecting the scene, the community, making sure that the bad guy doesn't get away from you if he is trying to flee, all of those components. And so really the checklist becomes not about dictating this is the only way to get it done, but more this is a way to save time on the clock for everybody, to get the threat neutralized faster, to get to our injured more quickly, figure out which are the ones that have the most severe injuries, get them off the scene more quickly, on and on down the road. I mean, doesn't that strike you that way, Kobe? That the totality of trying to put all this stuff together, if you don't have a plan?
Yeah, it's if you don't, I like to say that leadership starts at the barrel of the gun, wherever it is, and then it works its way out of there. And each step, each foot distance, whatever virtual separation you want to use from that, more leadership is there. You're still in charge at the gun because you're still doing that work, but it's just the layers of responsibility that adds onto there. And it goes all the way out to not just the scene you're at, but out to the instant command, and then to the hospitals, and then to the residents where the assailants originated from, and the vehicles, and all that comes into play. And if you don't have it, who's if it's not me, then who? That kind of thing. And then I can't put it back on the guy that's still got the gun in their hand to worry about what the perimeter looks like there.
That may be the phrase. If it's not me, then who?
Yeah.
And if you don't have a plan, if you're not operating from a checklist or something equivalent, then it's not me, but who is a big question mark.
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Gentlemen, thank you so much for doing this. For those that are listening, if you are not familiar with the checklist, we have a 60-second video, truly, it's less than 1 minute, that explains how to use the checklist. Carla, when you put that out, would you make sure to put a link to that video in the show notes for people to be able to see it? Gentlemen, thank you for coming in today. I appreciate it. For those of you that are watching, I hope you like and subscribe to the podcast. Let us know if you have any questions. We always appreciate the comments as well, the positive comments. Of course, the purpose of this is training, not trolling. And with that, Carla, our producer, Carla Torres, thank you. And stay safe till next time.